Terrifying real-life clowns. Why do they even exist? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 3 of these hilariously scary stories. Clown in the Fields. This is kinda short, but I think it fits here. My name is Anthony, and I am 20 currently. I live on my own nowadays, but when I was a kid, my family lived in a really nice home. We had a big backyard, and it was connected to a huge field of bushes and other cool plants such as bamboo. It is normal to see people walking their dogs along the trails here. One day, me and my little brother were hanging out in the backyard, and we decided to go play a game that our older brother had made up. We basically would climb to higher areas of a closed storm drain, drop rocks down, and yell at each other when we could hear the rock passing through our post. If the rock made it all the way to the bottom, we would grow excited, and of course, we were winners that time. Well, since it was just me and my little brother, we didn't have enough people to run every post. Instead, we decided to just run the bottom too. It meant less running up and down the steep hill anyway, so it really didn't bother me. We played it for a little while, and during one of our timeouts, I remember looking up into the field and seeing something that sort of creeped me out. It was a man or a woman. I think it was a man, but I was young and wasn't thinking about the gender specifically, dressed up as a clown, walking around with a big grin on their face. Edit. I just got a question and asked if it looked at me. I almost forgot to mention that one of the creepiest parts was that the damn thing waved at me. My brother and I calmly returned inside. I asked him if he saw what I saw, and he replied, "I think so." We moved out 3 years later, but we never saw the clown in the fields ever again. As strange as this experience was, I never really feared playing in the fields after this. I just remember thinking, what the heck? Part of me wanted to believe that I didn't actually see anything. And to this day, I wonder what the hell a clown was doing walking around the fields. Clown Mask Creeper. After spending the better half of my weekend reading the stories in this fantastic subreddit, I feel obliged to share a story. This is not my story, but it happened to my friend in the summer of 2010. My friend, we'll call her Emily, was running in a park about a mile from her house. Now during the day, this park is the safest place in the whole world, located next to a fairly busy street with houses surrounding it, and with a tennis court and a baseball field. This park was always filled with people. Since Emily had work that day, she decided to run around dusk, when the park was fairly empty. Although the park is located in a neighborhood, it is downright creepy around this time, and cops can usually be seen patrolling the area looking for drug dealers or horny teens. The trail she was running on is kind of hidden in the surrounding patch of forest and dips behind this little hill to where the baseball field is located. As she was approaching the baseball field, she notices a man sitting on the bench. Figuring it was just someone taking a break from a walk or something, she didn't really think anything of it. But as she approached him, is when things got weird. The guy was sitting there, wearing a clown mask. She said it looked like Pennywise from it. This obviously struck her as creepy, so she sped up from a jog to a run. A quick look over her shoulder, and she saw the guy had stood up and was starting to run after her. This obviously freaked the fuck out of Emily, so she just dead on sprinted back to her house. As Emily approached her house, her other friend Stacy had just pulled into the driveway. Emily screamed at Stacy to run in the house and call the cops. By this time, the clown creeper had lost interest and was nowhere to be seen. The cops came, looked around for the guy, and a report was filed. Nothing ever came of it. Emily was obviously scared out of her mind and refused to walk alone at night, and flat out avoided the park for a couple of years. Now, among our friend group, we had a kind of general consensus on who it was that chased Emily. We all figured it was this kid we knew from high school who lived less than a block away from the park. We will call him Jim. Now, Jim was always kind of strange and really into insane clown pose, and was just a generally creepy, a bit harmless individual. He could have just been reflecting upon the vast, majestic, sonically sexual music that is ICP, and wearing that mask was just his getaway, but most likely, his intentions were a bit more sinister. On a side note, a couple weeks later, I was driving home from a friend's house. The way I take passes Jim's house. There's also a stop sign that causes you to literally stop in front of his house. The windows were down because it was a hot night, and I slowly creeped to a stop at the stop sign. As I stopped, I look out the passenger side towards Jim's house, and lo and behold, sitting no farther than 5 feet from my car is Jim, looking fucked up. I mean, strung out hard on something. He looked up to me with this hazy, lost look on his face, and his mouth broke into this really strange grin. Needless to say, I hauled ass home and didn't sleep too well that night. Haven't seen or heard much about Jim since then, although I'm pretty sure he still lives in the same house. There's a crazy clown in the house. I've posted this story once before, in a lot less detail in a different thread, but never here. It is 100% true. It happened back in late 1980s, when I was home one summer on break from college. About 2 years prior, my dad had purchased an old house with the intention of eventually tearing it down to build a new home. The house was built in 1916, and like most houses built in that era, it had a really unconventional floor plan. There was a central living room and a kitchen like any normal home, but the 3 bedrooms were more akin to separate apartments. Each had its own separate outside entrance, a private bathroom, and a door that led to the common area living room and kitchen. Perhaps the place was originally intended to be a boarding house or something. I really don't know. The other thing that was a little creepy about the house was that it was all wood. The ceilings, walls, and floors were all brown, and nothing was ever painted or plastered. My dad was a pretty cool guy. While he was waiting for permits and financing, he let 3 of my friends live there for free in exchange for watching the place. They had a lot of parties, but my dad didn't care as long as none of the neighbors complained. I went to a few parties there myself when I was lucky enough to be home from college. Eventually, 2 of my friends moved out, leaving my one buddy there to watch the mostly empty house on his own. He was not the type of person to be afraid living alone in a half-empty house, so he was fine with the situation. I'm at home one afternoon when the phone rings. It's my buddy, and he sounds terrified. He tells me to call the police and to meet him out in the front of the driveway of the house, but under no condition go in. I ask him why, and he tells me that there's a crazy clown in the house. Apparently, He was sick with the flu in bed for the previous 2 days. When he finally felt well enough to go into the kitchen to get something to eat, he runs face to face with a crazy woman dressed in a clown suit and makeup who starts screaming at him. It was then that he ran out of the house and called me in a panic from a nearby gas station. I called the police and then drove over to the house, which was about 2 miles away. I found my buddy on the sidewalk out front, and he's really shaken up. I asked him to describe what he saw, and he keeps saying that there was a crazy clown woman in the house. I asked for more details, and he described her as dressed in a white clown suit, with the red makeup smeared all over her face. He is still a little sick, so he looks really bad, and honestly, he is really freaking me out as well. There was no way in hell that I was going into that house to investigate his story. After what seems like an eternity, a cop shows up. My buddy tells him the exact same story. The cop then goes into the house while we wait outside. After about 5 minutes, he emerges escorting a crazy clown woman who looks exactly as my friend described her. She has wild and kept brown hair and is wearing this weird baggy one-piece, all white body jumper suit. What was really disturbing though is her face. She had a tube of lipstick which she crudely spread red all over her cheeks in a failed attempt, I suppose, to make them look rosy. Although we were both freaked out, the cop thought it was hilarious. The clown woman claimed it was her house and then accused us of being on drugs and trespassing on her property. When the cop told her to get in the back of his squad car, she warned him that she had powerful friends in Tinseltown who would have him fired. When he comes back to talk to us, he tells us he can't arrest her for breaking and entering because the house is half abandoned. He said the best that he could do was to drive her a few blocks away and hope that she doesn't wander back. This, of course, freaks us out even more. Fortunately though, when they run a background check on her, it turns out she has an outstanding warrant and would be instead going to jail. That was the last time we saw her. When we go back into the house, we find all kinds of crazy stuff written on the kitchen cabinets and the same red lipstick she rubbed all over her face. There was some 10-day-old fish in the fridge that my friend never got around to eating, that she cooked on a stove and ate. The really scary thing was that this crazy woman was in the same house with my friend for at least a day while he was sick and semi-delirious in bed with a fever. She was probably harmless, but who knows what she would have done if she stumbled upon him while he was sleeping. His door was unlocked the entire time. Fortunately, she never did, as far as we know. One of the things she wrote on the cabinet in lipstick was her name. While I'm not allowed to disclose it here, I googled it and found a mugshot that was taken of her some years later.